So welcome again to week 2 of BB403. This is the Business of Craft Brewing marketing section. Again, my name is Nate, and I'm happy to go through a presentation on developing a marketing plan campaign today. So this is going to be a little different than some of the other live sessions in the sense that I don't have a live guest, but I think it's kind of nice for both me and you, I hope, just to be able to do the session in person. Obviously, some folks will be watching the recording here in a couple of days when it gets posted, but as usual, go ahead and chat. Use the chat tool to type in any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. I'm happy to take questions as we go along. And so I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the content. So as I said, this is going to be a presentation on what it takes to really go through the process of creating a marketing campaign. So here's the agenda. We'll obviously provide all the context, talk about what a marketing campaign is, and then really what the various steps are. And then at the end, we're actually going to do a little case study. I've sort of created a fake campaign that we'll talk through, and that way you can sort of get an idea of what the process is like, what the time frames are like, and so on and so forth. So like I said, without further ado, let's go ahead and power on through. So the definition of a marketing campaign: this is a specific design series of activities that are used in marketing a new or changed product or service. Sometimes all you're really doing is maybe you got some new design or new graphics that you want to launch. But the idea is that this is a discrete amount of marketing that has a point and has, as we'll see, some real measurable and hopefully attainable goals within the structure of this marketing campaign. So as with everything that you're going to do throughout marketing your craft beverage, you really want to make sure that this is placed in the context of what's going on with the rest of your marketing plan, right? So you're not going to at any point ignore the demographics or the psychographics of who your target audience is. You really need to pay attention to that and make sure that your marketing plan, or excuse me, marketing campaign is created and designed with your appropriate target market in mind. You're going to obviously pay attention to those 4 Ps that we talked about in the first week in that first video. It's pretty important that you keep in mind where your brand is situated within that framework of the 4 Ps. Brand culture: obviously you're not going to create a marketing campaign that is a wild departure from the brand culture that you've created with your other marketing materials and previous marketing campaigns. And then as with everything that you do in your business, you're gonna pay attention to budget. You're gonna start out with a defined budget, and you really want to make sure that you're not blowing the bank or really going wildly over that defined budget that you started out with. It should fit in the context of the full year's marketing budget. So you're ideally not going to spend 12 months worth of marketing budget on a single campaign, even though that marketing campaign very well may, as you'll see, last 6 weeks, or excuse me, 6 months or more. You really just want to make sure that you're paying attention to that budget process. So the first step is to really develop a goal. You want to understand what it is that you're creating this marketing campaign for. Very often, as we said, it's going to be based on a new product, or perhaps you've decided that your sales or market share is slipping a little bit, so you need to create a new marketing campaign to refresh your brand visibility in the marketplace. Or perhaps you have just a new seasonal offering that, or not even new, maybe it's something that comes around every spring, but you just want to make sure that that seasonal offering is refreshed in the mind of the consumer, so that folks know, hey, you know, my cidery has a new product out. It's really time to make sure people would come in if they haven't been in for 4 or 5 months, because there's something that they haven't had for a while. And then that acronym on the left of the slide here, SMART, That's specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and timely. Those are pieces of every marketing campaign. That should be the goal. If you define a marketing campaign's goals, they should absolutely be very specific. You should be able to define pretty succinctly and concisely what it is you want to do. There should be some way to measure whether or not you have attained your goal at the end of the marketing campaign. Same thing, attainable. If you can, even if you can measure it, but there's no way you could meet it, right? If you say you want to multiply your sales by 1,000% with a very simple marketing campaign of a couple of print ads, that's probably not going to be an attainable goal, and so you might want to revise what that goal is. The goal should be reasonable, right? It should not, again, similar to attainable, it shouldn't really be something that's wildly out of bounds. It should be something that makes sense with the scale of your product or the scale of what you're trying to market. And then it should be timely. You don't really want to pay attention to, you should be paying attention to seasonality. You should also be paying attention to whether or not you're using marketing materials or marketing language that is rather dusty. So in the cover page this week, I referenced the 10 barrel story that happened in the fall of 2014. If you were to create a new marketing campaign, it probably wouldn't make sense to be referencing that 10 barrel. Plus, there's been plenty of other newer news that you could use to make the same point, right? So the next step is obviously probably the most important, and it's going to be quite often the most difficult and most time consuming, and that's really developing the content. So you're going to come up with some language, you're probably going to come up with some artwork or other design materials that you're going to make use of, and then you're going to decide exactly how it is that you're going to make use of that content. So there's lots of different options, from print ads, online, Facebook, social media, that sort of stuff. Whether you want your sales team, whether you have such a group other than yourself, or you just yourself, to go out and hit the streets with, say, a bunch of new posters that are advertising a new seasonal product. Are you going to feature discounts or other promotions? You know, buy one get one free, or 10% off your first case of the new product. What about merchandise? Are you going to put out a new sweatshirt or a new hat to go along with your new product? These are all the different things, outreach, PR, these are all the various different ideas, and there's obviously tons more options that you can do to really leverage the content aspect of your marketing campaign and make sure that it's successful. That's the whole goal, right, is to get the word out with every opportunity and every promotion you can come up with, to make sure that whatever your defined goals were at the beginning, that you're leveraging every possible tool you can come up with to find success. So the next thing is the timeline. You need to understand how long it's going to take. And really what I'm suggesting is that you really want to start with a proposed start date, with a launch date of when you want to hit go on all of your advertising and all of your, you know, if you're going to release a new product, maybe you're going to throw a party, beer release party or something like that, give a little speech at the tap room. But that's the date that you're going to start with, and then you're going to work backwards. This is especially critical if you're doing things like seasonal releases. So if you're coming out with a winter warmer, or say a pumpkin beer, you probably want that to launch sometime in the late fall or early winter, and that's going to be a pretty critical date. From there, you're going to work back, and all of these other steps. Recipe testing and production is one of the shorter pieces. How do you feed your distribution partners to make sure that on that launch date they have all of the product they need in order to stock the shelves in the grocery stores and the pubs and tap rooms and things like that around. If you're launching and you want to have beer blogs and newspaper articles written up about your new product, then you need to make sure that your PR is ready to go, say, a week or so ahead of time, so that those ads are going to come out, and earned media is going to come out when it's time and not a month after your product launch, because it sort of diminishes the viability of that PR. Same thing, label approvals. We'll show a Gantt chart later on, but this is often one of the surprisingly slow parts of the process of creating a marketing campaign, and you really need to be thinking about that, the design aspects, and then getting it submitted to all of the different approval bodies, whether so last week Bruce was talking about Oregon Tilth that Hopworks has to submit all of their labels to well ahead of submitting it to the Tax and Trade Bureau, right? So if Oregon Tilth isn't going to approve a label that is for an organic product, then it's not even worthwhile submitting it to Tax and Trade Bureau unless you're willing to drop any mention of organic. So you need to think about those approval processes before, really well before the launch date. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more down the road. Farthest back is the design and materials production. So if you're coming up with new artwork, say a new label for a seasonal release, then how long does your designer, or if the designer is you, how long do you need to finalize that product, that label, or any of the sort of drawings that are going to go on sweatshirts and other things like that, merchandise, and make sure that you have more than enough time for the material production and the design to get done before. Obviously, that's got to be done before you submit the label, right? So the final step, and this is really the fun and exciting one, and that's really executing your marketing plan. So you've laid all the groundwork well ahead. You've got all of the design work done. You've got it submitted and approved by Tax and Trade Bureau. You've got your sweatshirts or your hats in stock and ready to put out on the store shelves as soon as it's time. So this is the exciting day. This is what probably the easiest part of marketing campaigns, and that's just hitting go, making sure that everything's running smoothly and everything is out in the market ready to sell. One thing, obviously, if you hit a delay from the Tax and Trade Bureau, then you want to make sure that you push back the rest of your timeline. If Tax and Trade Bureau comes back and needs you to make a couple of changes to the label before it gets approved, that's going to take a couple of weeks. Then you need to make sure if you can make that time up, then that's great. If not, you need to make sure that other aspects from distribution to PR timeframes get pushed back so that you're not getting sort of spilling the beans with a blog post that is a week ahead of your actual launch date, that sort of thing. So obviously adjust that timeline before you hit go, but it's the easiest part is really getting the product and hitting go. John asked, is there any drawback to submitting multiple possible labels to the TTB, knowing that you would use only one? You know, I don't think there's necessarily a drawback. I would imagine TTB would, if you did that too many times, they might have a tendency to slow your approval process down even further, just because they know that you're not necessarily counting on any one of those with all of your heart, that you're interested in more than one. So I would be leery of doing that very often. But their goal is to just make sure that you're not using things like cartoons to advertise alcohol, because that's not something that our society really approves of. But you know, I haven't heard of anyone doing that. Like I said, I would be leery of doing that very often, but I think it would be, yeah, the cost is not exorbitant, and I think they think of more of the approval process because they're getting taxes down the road for that product being sold. So I don't think the charge is exorbitant. I don't think it would be worth something for it. So really, I said that the last step is to hit go and to execute your marketing campaign. That's not actually the case, because probably the most important part, even if it's not the most fun, is to really evaluate the success, or hopefully not less than success, of the campaign that you launched. So now is when you go back and look at the original goal of your marketing campaign. Whether it was a sales target, did you hit that sales target? Did you sell 15% more volume of your total sales than post marketing campaign and product launch than before? Now is when you go and start to ask for customer feedback. So if you have a tapped room, this is a great time to make sure that all your servers are dropping comment cards, so that you understand if there's if people are enjoying the new product, or if there's improvements that you would like to make upon it. And then there's also some tools. You'll hear a lot more about some of the online analytics in starting next week, when Lisa takes over with the online marketing section. But there's lots of different ways to sort of gather feedback from your customer base in the online realm. From very passive things like just reading comments on your Facebook, or retweets, that sort of stuff, Instagram pictures, to posting surveys and being a little more proactive in terms of gathering that feedback. But that's really the evaluation phase. You really want to understand if your marketing campaign worked, why it worked, and if there's things that you really need to improve upon for the next go around. And then that's all going to fold in and get wrapped into the next iteration of planning a marketing campaign. And you also may want to tweak your broader marketing plan based on some of the learnings coming out of that marketing campaign as well. So, like I said, I'm going to go through just a simple case study. We're going to talk about, we're going to run through the process with this as an example. So we're going to use an existing cidery. I've got a cidery that's been in business for 3 years. I've got in the marketplace limited distribution at some local grocery stores and nearby regional pubs. I already sell 3 different products. And I'm coming out with a new seasonal canned product. So I'm going to plan a marketing campaign to launch that seasonal fall winter campaign, or excuse me, winter canned cider. And that target launch date is November 1st. So again, I'm going to start with the front end work with the content development. Again, thinking about the context that we mentioned early on, and for this particular campaign, I've decided that awareness of the new package and product is my #1 top goal, and sales growth of 15% in overall revenue over last year, based on launching and providing this new product out in the market. So I think that those meet my SMART goals framework, and I'm going to go ahead and start planning the marketing campaign. So I've decided that the content that I would like to make use of for this campaign is a major social media push on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well, and I'm going to use a hashtag winter warmer that I'll do some giveaways with, as well as just make sure that people are reusing that hashtag in order to give me a little bit of feedback, so I can understand how many people I've reached. You probably, again, will learn a little bit about that, impressions and understanding how many people are on board with your social media later on. But using those hashtags are a quick way, if you're sure that hashtag is not being used for something else. That's a nice way to know how many people are on board with your marketing campaign. I'm going to also create some off-premise sales signage. So want to have an end cap at a grocery store. That's what I'm shooting for. And so I'm going to create some small signs, maybe some shelf tackers. That's the little sign that goes below the price tag of my product. And I'm going to come out with a hooded sweatshirt since it's a fall product. I think that's a good fit. And then, of course, I'm going to try and make sure that the local craft beverage bloggers and writers for the newspaper are on board, know that the product is coming, and can hopefully give me a review when it comes time. So that's the content for my campaign. Hoping that it's going to work out well. So here's the timeline that I've put together. Again, like I said before, I'm going to start with a final launch date. So that's the bottom line here is my launch date. It's going to go live on November 1st, and I'm going to work backwards from there. So I'm going to assume that about a week before that November 1st launch date, I'm going to start shipping out all the press releases and like I said, try and get some product in the hands of the local beer bloggers and writers so that they have a chance to taste it and write a review. I'm also going to start with a little bit of social media buzz generation. And I'm going to actually start that about a month ahead of time, just start talking a little bit, some sort of hints about what's happening here in the fourth week before the launch date, and then slowly build that buzz through all the social media channels, using that hashtag, maybe leaking some pictures of what the label's going to look like, that sort of stuff, as I build up to the launch date. A couple of weeks before launch date, I'm going to make sure that the product is finished and it's going to get delivered to the distributor so that, like I said, it can be on the store shelves or ready to hit the store shelves when it's time, when launch date comes. Final production, this is going to be a 3-week process, so I want to start, we're back to about 4 or 5 weeks before the launch date. So this is when I have cider in tanks, fermenting and filtered and ready to go here just a couple of weeks before launch date, so that, like I said, I can get it shipped out to the distributor. Recipe testing obviously is going to be something, depending on how different this product is from my standard set of products. It's going to take, I'm pegging it at about 5 weeks, so I can sort of do a first test batch, have a good idea how it's going to work out here after a few weeks, and then do a second test batch after that with the final changes that I think is going to get me to where I want it to be for a final product. And that has me ready to go on, like I said, about 5 weeks ahead of time with the final product production. So this next step up is, I mentioned I'm going to create a sweatshirt that goes along with this product launch. So sweatshirt production and delivery, this means that I already have the artwork created, and I'm going to make it simple for myself. I'm just going to reuse the label design, major elements from that label design, and put it on a sweatshirt. So I don't have to do any additional content development or design work, but I do need to make sure that that order is off to the sweatshirt manufacturer, screen printer. Here, this is about a month and a half, 6 weeks ahead of my launch date, so that I can get shipments of those sweatshirts on my doorstep and ready to be sold here a couple of weeks ahead of time. That gives, in case there's a production delay or any sort of shipping delays, any of that sort of stuff, there's still a little bit of leeway for that to make it to my doors. I said that I'm going to put this product in a can. That is going to create a rather large chunk of time that I need to be ahead of time. And this is really where you start to set the schedule of content design and creation way back here. That's going to take me a few weeks based on how I know I work, and I work with the designer, a couple of different iterations of that can label. And then I know that it's going to take me 5 or 6 weeks to get approval from TTB, and then and only then can I get, once that label is approved from TTB, do I ship it off to Ball, where they're going to start printing my 16-ounce cans, and it's going to take another 6 weeks for that production order of cans to get created and then get shipped out across the country to where I have my cidery. So those cans I have scheduled, if everything's going well, to arrive about a week ahead of time, ahead of production finalizing with the cider. So you can see if my start date is November 1st, I have a really long lead time. I need to be thinking pretty clearly about this product way back in early July. So while it may seem like a simple deal to say, hey, I want to launch a new product come November, you need to be thinking about design work. You need to be thinking about what the product is going to be made of. If you're adding different spices or different things like that to a cider or to a spiced beer, perhaps, you really need to set that Gantt chart very long term ahead of time and make sure that you're giving yourself adequate amounts of time for each of these various different steps to run their course in order to make sure that your product is going to be completed, ready to be sold at the distributor, and finally ready to launch on your November 1st launch date. So, think about what Bruce was talking about. Some of the hardest things he has to do is come up with marketing language that is going to go on the can label before they're anywhere near recipe testing. So he knows hopefully what sort of hops is going to go in that new beer, and he's got a good idea what those hops taste like so that he can create some marketing language around it. But man, if you're a little less familiar, or if you're trying to create something that's a pretty broad departure from your normal product line, you can see how you're really going to have to either talk very generally about what the product tastes like on the label and some of those other materials that are getting designed really early on, or do some test batches 6 months ahead of time so you know what you're doing, and then let that test batch, maybe you do this process right here 6 months ahead of time, and then you don't do it again until it's time for final production. But you really need to think carefully about what all needs to go into that product before it actually launches. So we've set our timeline. We've done all the work that we decided we needed to do over the various 4 or 5 months ahead of time, and we hit go. It's time to execute. So we send our sales team out with all of the on-premise signs for grocery stores and bars. We made sure that product is in the hand of the beer bloggers a couple of weeks ahead, and we're getting some great reviews in the local paper and then online on beer blogs and cider blogs, things like that. Now it's time to really assess whether or not we're doing what we want, right? So did we hit those sales targets? I wanted to do 15% year over year. Well, that's not something I'm going to be able to manage until maybe the end of November or December even, so that I can put that sales revenue actuals from this year and compare them to a year ago. Since my goal was to do better than last year, that's the only way I'm going to know if I was successful at meeting that goal. And then also want to just do some feedback gathering, right? You're going to go talk to folks if you have a tap room and just say, hey, what do you think of the new winter warmer farmhouse hard cider that we created? Have you tried it yet? Did you know that we came out with it? So that you can really get a better idea of, are the people reading the pieces of advertising that you put out there? They get, if you have a newsletter, are your fans that are on that signed up for that newsletter going to be ready and receiving the news about that product? This is the type of stuff that you really want to make sure you're gathering the feedback, because like I said, it's going to inform the success, and then you're going to use that to create the next marketing campaign and hopefully be even more successful as some very smart people have said, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome is not the wisest choice. So if you're not learning from both what went well and what did not go well, then you're not doing it right. So that's the content I had for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions about creating a marketing campaign. Anything I said, create some questions for you, or other thoughts you might have about how to put together a marketing campaign for your product. Now's your chance. Sure. So Janine asked, what about a marketing campaign for a brew pub that doesn't have distribution? So really the only thing that you're going to do differently is maybe you don't have to have a 2-week lead time for final production, because you don't need it. You don't need your product to get out to a distributor. However, you do still want to have a handful of kegs sitting in the cold room ready for your launch date, so that if sales go gangbuster, you've got more than enough product that you're not going to run out in just a couple of days. That's an unfortunate thing. If people are really excited about a new product, you don't want to stock out on the first week. You're still going to do that recipe generation and all of those sorts of steps. If you're going to put, say you do 22-ounce bottles, you're still going to need to go down the label creation and design, and then approval processes. If you're really just a simple tap room and you only create product for your in-house consumption, then the process is definitely a lot shorter. But you're still gonna create some marketing content, whether it's social media posts and blogs and things like that. You still want to work backwards from that launch date with a good idea of exactly what it is that's going to go into your marketing campaign. So maybe it's not going to be a 5 or 6 month lead time that you start out, but I'm going to say that you're at least going to start a couple of months ahead of time with maybe some design work to understand what the social media campaign looks like, or if you're going to create a faux label that's only going to go up on social media, you still need to design that and put it together a while ahead of time. And then, of course, recipe testing and production is going to take some time as well. Does that answer your question? Sure. Good question, Jonathan. You asked what's the difference between a marketing plan and a marketing campaign. And yeah, I think the second part of your question here, marketing campaign or marketing plan, in some ways is a series of marketing campaigns. Although as you start looking at the framework that I assigned for that marketing plan, what that's going to do is going to lay out the structure that your marketing overall marketing budget and overall marketing ideas are going to come out in. And then the marketing campaign is going to be the sort of discrete chunks of promotions and advertising that make up the sort of details of your marketing plan. So maybe your marketing plan lays out the culture of your brand and what sort of materials you're going to create throughout the course of the year, whether or not you're going to have banners that you take to events and festivals, and what sort of events and festivals you attend. But then the marketing campaigns are going to be those smaller chunks of that. So maybe for summer festival season, you're going to come out with a rattler and you're going to design a bunch of artwork and social media campaign pushes within that summer event season, and consider that a discrete campaign. So there's going to be design work that goes ahead of that rattler product that you're going to highlight throughout the summer festival season. So yes and no. The campaigns are definitely what make up the bulk of that marketing plan, but the marketing plan is really going to provide the sort of structure and framework that set the guideposts and as other people sometimes say, provide the guardrails within which your campaigns are going to be created. I hope I answer your question. I do not believe that keg collars require TTB approval. That is something that I will have to ask and confirm with one of my colleagues, though. I believe that since they are not going out for general consumption, that's not something that has to have the same level of approval. Sure. So Didim is asking about the marketing plan. I assume that's what you're talking about, marketing plan. Um, you, I, so my answer is going to be sort of a waffle of an answer, but I think you should decide what is going to be the most useful for you. If you are interested in down the road creating a tap room or a brew pub, then do something imaginary. Just go out on a limb and imagine what it would be like for down the road. If, on the other hand, this is more of a marketing exercise for you, then I would suggest picking a local brand that you like and imagining that you're going through the process of creating their marketing plan. Or if you know somebody that owns a bar or a restaurant or a brew pub, then ask them. Maybe they would love you to go through that process on their behalf. That's definitely something that I've done in the past. Back in my school days, was to work through the process for a friend that was thinking about starting a brew pub and restaurant. He was really thrilled that I was able to go through the process of creating a marketing plan for his as yet unestablished business. Anyone else with thoughts and questions about developing marketing campaigns? One of the other things that I intended to ask Bruce last week is how they integrate some of the community service projects that they do. And I would just highlight that one of the things that you can consider in creating a marketing campaign, and I was thinking about it for Hopworks because they do a great job of each month they have what they call a community tap, and so they partner with an organization that changes once a month, and for the whole month of April, they're giving 1% of every pint to I believe it's Kruger Farm this month, and so that becomes the creation and the content around a discrete campaign in and of itself. So they post social media about the farm itself. They post how some of the funds are going to go to help that particular organization, that sort of stuff. But this is yet another, this is yet another way that you can think about coming up with a discrete campaign. And the idea is that, especially with those community service type projects, this is something that you're doing it obviously because you think it's the right thing to do, I hope. But you're also, if you're doing it right and you're telling the story correctly, you're going to find some positive public feedback from going through that process of partnering with a community organization. And so it's a really great idea to make sure that people know, at least on some level, that you're joining with the community and working on that project with the community. So Luke asks, pros and cons of targeting a specific psycho/demographic in an ad campaign. Yeah, I think that's something that different brands, based on who their target market is and what sort of niche they find themselves working in, are going to have different scales of how they sort of try to appeal. So if you have a tap room that is very neighborhood oriented, I'm thinking about here in Portland, there's a place called the Tugboat that's right downtown, but it's a very small place, small brew pub. They have no distribution that I've ever seen, and their whole goal seems to be to create a very homey feel it's sort of meant to be like the local that you will go hang out in if you don't want to go home to your living room quite yet. And so for them, their advertising, to the extent that they do any, is probably going to be very tightly focused. They really want to just make sure they're talking to the folks that know them or like them already, or are similar to their target market, so that they can make sure those folks keep coming in the door. On the other hand, if you're a brewery with some regional distribution and you are hoping to spread outside of the target market that you're already working with, then you certainly are going to be able to provide or create multiple different campaigns. Some of those campaigns are going to be tightly focused still on, say, working with cyclists. We're going to support a bunch of races this summer. Make sure you come out and drink beer after riding your bike. But then on the same token, that regional brewery might be trying to advertise to parents because they're a family-friendly tap room. So you can definitely target different demographics. There's absolutely your follow-on point though is that if you aren't careful, you're going to dilute your brand too much, and so folks are not going to either enjoy the multiple different target audiences. That maybe the cyclist crowd is not going to be happy to come sit down next to a screaming kid, and so you can have clashes in terms of how you're marketing or the various different audiences that you're marketing to. And yes, absolutely. If you don't have some guardrails around who you're trying to market to, then you may find that audience is getting too diluted, and you're not going to be successful in marketing to any one of those numerous audiences that you think you're trying to reach. How important is it to have a Twitter presence? I think the jury is probably still out. I think there's some people that say any and all social media are places that you have to have at least some degree of presence on. I think other people might suggest that if you don't have the time and inclination to own it in an effective manner, then it's just a waste of time. I think if you don't want to be on Twitter, then don't do it, because it's going to come across that you're not happy using that social media tool, and you're not going to get followers. You're not going to find success leveraging that tool to promote your brand. Most successful campaigns, I think some of the promotions that many of you were talking about in the introduction post last week. I think several of you mentioned the New Belgium Fat Tire. Sorry, I'm blanking on the festival that they go out with. I think that's Festival with They Fat. That's one of the more interesting and I would definitely say successful brand awareness campaigns. It's huge. If you're, not very many of you are going to get to the size of New Belgium anytime soon, so certainly not something that you should try to emulate, a national traveling roadshow, but in the sense that it gets the word out about their brand in markets all around the country. I think it's wildly successful, and I think it also is great in the sense that it builds a strong cultural tie to several different types of people. You mentioned that there's a strong bike connection. Folks are able to turn their cars in for bicycles, and one of you have done that in the past. I think that's just a wildly successful campaign. On the other hand, I think there's some smaller stuff that has been really, Janine turned her sob in, as I recall. There's some other much smaller and simpler campaigns that I think are pretty interesting and have sort of done a nice job of get the word out about their brand. I'm a big fan of Migration's recent low carbon Littlefoot ale that they came out with here just a couple of months ago. I think it was a really interesting project in the sense that they worked with Portland State University, and so they engaged a large group of young consumers that they worked with directly. And then just the messaging around how much carbon goes into your beer and some of the materials that they created were really interesting, and they got a ton of earned media throughout that project. So in my mind, that was a wildly successful campaign that was really driven largely by Portland State University students, so it probably didn't cost them much, if anything. And the students even created all of the marketing materials around that project, and it seemed like it was wildly successful. And while I got there, about 2 days after their beer launch, they had already sold out of all the product. That seems to me like a pretty good stamp of approval that they had flown through. I think they made a 20-barrel batch of that beer. So that seems like another pretty successful campaign. Print ads, Chris asks about print ads and whether they're successful. I think, again, this is going to be a waffling answer, but for some of the large regional brands, I think they can be really useful just in maintaining brand awareness. Putting advertisement in a local paper or regional paper can be a nice way just to sort of maintain that brand awareness. On the other hand, for some of the smaller brew pubs in the grand scheme of things, I think if you're a pretty small cidery brewery or distillery, then it's going to be pretty critical you focus very carefully on your target audience. Otherwise, you're just going to be spending a lot more money than you probably should on purchasing that advertisement in the first place. So if you think carefully about who or what sort of publications there are that have very distinct crossover appeal to your target audience, then it might make sense to do a print ad. Again, I come back a lot to the family-friendly brew pub. If that's your spiel, then maybe the Portland Parent magazine would be a fairly inexpensive place to have good success with a print ad. On the other hand, if you're a biker bar, then maybe Portland Family Magazine is not such a great place to advertise. And yes, I definitely agree, Eric. Print ads can be some of the most interesting art pieces that come out. I think about Gigantic's labels. If I found some ads promoting some of their, Gigantic is a small brewery here in Portland that uses fairly well-known comics to design their 22-ounce bottle labels. I think that sort of thing can get picked up and cut out, and that's a pretty nice, cool way to share your brand. Some of the other less obvious ways to use that same art is in things like using or creating those posters that you might give to bars when you launch a new product. Still going to be a poster-sized piece of design work that's going to have all the information about your new product, and it might be useful to share. And then, of course, if it looks good, then the bar might keep it up long after your product has come and gone, which is just going to keep your brand awareness up there on a constant and ongoing basis. Jeff asked, hiring a company that contracts for social media. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, and Lisa will definitely get into this a little bit more, but I think that, depending on how well your contract social pinch hitters are willing to, how much they're willing to learn about your brand and culture, is going to make a difference in terms of whether or not they're hitting the right notes as they try to build that engagement. I, I think it's a nice way to leverage a much smaller amount of resource in terms of if you can pay somebody $100 a month to build engagement on Twitter and Instagram, that's a heck of a lot cheaper than paying a part-time social media assistant or administrator or something like that. So it's if it's on message and it is on culture, then I think there's probably no harm. I think that's just the thing that you have to make sure is that check their references and check their previous work to learn whether or not this potential contract social person is good at really marketing the brands that they work for with effectiveness and on target and on brand. Any other questions? All right. Getting quiet out there. Time for beer. Yeah, I cracked mine a few minutes ago. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully this was a little bit different, but useful way to get some content out there. And of course, if you have any questions, make sure or feel free to use that contact your instructor button on the upper right of the main screen. And yeah, happy Tuesday. Have a great night. Cheers. Good to see you. See you again next time. Oh yeah, sorry, Robert. The slides this has been recorded, so it will be posted in the next 2 or 3 days or so. And I'll be sure to put a PDF up as well. Cheers, y'all.